In the first video, we looked at the definition of a concept based on knowledge. Now we're going to look at the idea of a concept based on action and skill. So we've established that Lynn Erickson's model is really useful for thinking about when we're learning facts that are represented within a topic and drawing out the concepts that allow us to transfer that learning across multiple examples and be able to critically think about it. Lynn Erickson pointed out that when you're working in disciplines which are more process-based, about going through a number of steps in order to achieve an aim, such as frequently the arts, English language arts, literature, design, then we're not so interested often in sort of static knowledge about how things are. We're more interested about the processes involved. And that would be true also that most subjects have this as an element. So for example, within science, on the left, you would have all the conceptual understanding about how we classify the natural world around us. But on the right, you'd have all your understandings about the scientific method and experimentation, how we do that process, what makes it effective, what makes it work, what are the stages. So when we're thinking about the right-hand side, we're thinking about actions and skills, things that happen, rather than classification of objects, which is what we're doing on the left. So the definition of a concept is still true when we're thinking about skills, that it's a mental construct which is timeless, universal, abstract to differing degrees, and represented by one or two words and examples that share common attributes. And the alternative definition of a group or class of objects or phenomena that share critical attributes whilst having many variable attributes. So next, let's look at one specific example of an action and then see what kind of skills, strategies, processes, and ultimately concepts we might use to understand it.
Guarantee he'll be ready come the start of the campaign.
Now Lukaku, he's beaten Edison to it. Romelu Lukaku scores for Manchester United. Well, it's not his first in that famous jersey, but it will feel very special.
So let's have a think about this example. It's an action, it's a specific event, so he scores a goal. Well, let's think about what's going on here. We could pick out one particular action of that. He headed the ball past the goalie, and so we could be thinking about heading as a skill, and you'd imagine students might be practicing that in a particular unit in which they happen to be playing football. We might abstract that a bit and say the reason why he headed it was to get past the goalie in the back line, and that's a strategy. What he was trying to do was create space. And we could be looking at strategies for creating space within particular games. Or we could be more looking at the process, the overall series of stages that a particular action goes through. So this could be a process about offensive moves, how they're set up, how they go through an action stage, and how they get to a finishing stage where there's some sort of goal, depending on the game. And the concept here that we might pull out might be invasion games. What we're looking at is invasion games. And we're looking at offensive processes, we're looking at strategies for creating space, and we've got to practice skills like heading in order to be able to do that. That's when Lanning's diagram really comes into its own, because we can begin to see that. You can say, okay, I've got it at the bottom, at the most basic. In process-based subjects, you learn skills like heading, but you're simultaneously learning strategies like creation of space and processes for offensive moves. And then the concepts sit above. But it's worth noting the reason why the diagram has a big block at the bottom and then jumps to concepts is because you can pull concepts from any one of those levels. So if you look at the strategy level, the idea of creating space, we might be looking at the idea of using space in many different scenarios as our main driving concept of the unit. It might have the context of invasion games, but our focus might be space. The one thing that's worth noting about action and skill concepts is they're not the end of the story. So whilst we might say if we're learning about regular polygons in maths. Once we understand them, then that was the goal of the learning, and we're kind of done. You know, once we really know how to define them, then our learning of how they're defined is finished. When we're looking at processes, we know that they get better. So I might understand the idea of space, or think I do, but the idea of actually using it in many contexts and improving my use of it in different invasion games, being able to transfer skills between them and then get better at them and make them more effective, moves into the realm of deliberate practice. And this is something that concept-based learning traditionally doesn't talk very much about, but is enormously important. And so we bear that in mind, that when we're looking at concepts for actions and skills, we both want the conceptual understanding of how they work, where would they work, what they are, how they're effective. And we also need to build in deliberate practice with feedback. We've looked at a sport example now to make that point that in areas where knowledge is the key outcome, we're looking at nouns. Where actions and skills are involved, we're looking for the verbs, we're looking for the doing. And that Lanning's diagram is enormously helpful to think about what are the skills or strategies or process that are being learned, and what concepts are going to make those really meaningful for students to be able to transfer skills and strategies between different contexts. The same would be true if we were in, say, design technology, where we might be, say, prototyping a soapbox derby sort of car, and we might be having a particular skill. So it might be some sort of construction skill. The strategy might be to reduce drag, and the process might be the design process. And the concepts we might want to highlight in that case might be aerodynamics. Same would be true if we were, say, in an English language arts classroom, where we might be writing memoir, and that might be the particular skill we're doing. And a strategy we might use would be sort of evocative description, or even synesthesia, mixing the senses together. That's my strategy for writing an effective memoir, and the process might be the writing process. And the concept we want to go in on is perhaps evocation or elaboration. There might be this concept that we're trying to pull out through the writing, saying what we're really learning about is the way that writers evoke scenes, and we can transfer that between different stories, different medium, see how those skills and strategies transfer.